It's time. We're going to start on time. This will not be a disaster of a talk about disasters. So this talk actually started from a 20Books panel that I was on, several years ago. We were at Samstown, and it was the last panel of the conference. And I was up on the main stage with Craig Martelle and Michael Anderle and Mark Dawson and a couple of other people. And they were all pumped, and they were like, oh, I had the best year ever, and they're going on, and Mark Dawson had the best year, and Craig Martelle, and everybody's talking about how wonderful and great everything's going. And no, I came up in traditional publishing. My first novel was published, 34 years ago from Signet Books. And I've been through a whole lot in my publishing career. And so everybody's like pumped, and it's the best year ever. And it comes to me, and I said, you guys are so optimistic because you've never had your first crash yet. And that really got me, and I started talking about that we had a total crash and burn year. It was about 2009, 2010. And I'll go over a bunch of this stuff here. And I just said, indie publishing is like new. It's boomtown. Everything's going great. And you're like just to the top of that first big roller coaster. And you know what happens in a roller coaster. So I wanted to end this whole conference by making everybody depressed and down. So I actually put together this talk about, and I started talking to my other writer friends about, man, what happens when you hit the black ice? And I was talking about indie publishing, how it's racing along, and you've got, this is wonderful. You're out in the open road, and you're in a convertible, and you got all the freedom to do what you want, and there are endless possibilities ahead, and it's all great, except you want to be careful it's not Thelma and Louise driving. So just let me give you a little perspective to start out with, and it's always good for my ego to be talking about some of these things, but I find a lot of people that come from the big successful indie stuff I'm not a household name to them. They don't necessarily know what my background is. So I have published, well, this is a year old, I have published 175 books. It's closer to 180 or something now, but who's counting? My wife counted, that's how I know. I have 24 million copies in print in 33 languages. I've had 58 national or international bestsellers, including a #1 London Sunday Times bestseller, that's up there. I was the #1 overall book on Amazon in all categories, so they sent me a cardboard award, really. It's on a piece of cardboard that they sent it. I've won lots of awards. I've won or been nominated for the Hugo Award, the Nebula Award, the Bram Stoker Award, the Seamus Award, the New York Times Notable Book, the Rita Romance Award, the Colorado Book Award, the Scribe Award. I actually have a Guinness World Record. That's the real Guinness World Record for the largest single author book signing in history. I was inducted into the Colorado Author Hall of Fame. There was this movie I worked on, Dune. I don't know if anybody's heard of this or not. And there I had a full screen credit. It wasn't in the roll-up with a million names. I had a full screen to myself on that movie. But wait, it gets better. I'm a Trivial Pursuit question. Right there. His father's science fiction shoes. And they made money on that because I had to buy 2 copies of the game so I could frame each side of the card. And I've been a question on Jeopardy. Twice. Also, I was one of the founders of the Superstars Writing Seminars about 15 years ago. Me and David Farland and my wife Rebecca, Brandon Sanderson, and Eric Flint founded Superstars. At the time, it was the first and only writing seminar that taught the business of writing. It was kind of a prototype for 20Books. There was no other thing about business for your writing. And for one of the panels that we were doing, it was if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give? And a lot of times we kind of skim those, go, oh, well, I'll just talk. But I really thought about that, and I took it seriously, and I went, well, what advice would I tell now that I've been through a bunch of stuff and I've learned? And seriously, remember, with all those credits that I just showed you, the advice that I would give to my younger self and to all of you is never, ever assume that you have it made. You might have everything going for you, but do not assume that it's going to keep rolling like that. One of my best friends in the industry is Dean Wesley Smith. That's Dean and me and at Writers of the Future, as well as our dear departed friend David Farland. A lot of you might know Dave. He came here and he founded the Apex Writers Workshop. Dean sat next to me once and he just kind of looked at me and he said, so Kev, how many times have you crashed and burned in your career? Because he was talking about how many times he has crashed. And I thought about it and I said, well, I have crashed and burned and resurrected my career so many times, you might as well call me the doctor. There are lots of ways that your career can spin around on black ice. And I'm going to go over some of them so that you can kind of see examples. Now, the first and most obvious one is don't sabotage your own career. Some of those people may look familiar to you. Although if anybody's seen the Nicolas Cage movie making fun of Nicolas Cage about, that's right. That's what you need to do to come back. But some of those others, I'm not sure they're salvageable. Sabotaging your own career. And this is like a whole lecture, and you should all know this stuff. Meet your deadlines. Be professional and easy to work with. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. Don't badmouth other authors. They're all your peers. Don't go off the deep end with politics and social media attacks. You might feel good and you might get your cronies that agree with you, but you'll make yourself toxic. Nobody else will want to work with you. I could name all kinds of instances of people who've done that, but when I watch that happen, when I watch somebody just torpedoing their own career because of their own stupid actions, I'll try to advise them, I'll try to get them to course correct, but if they don't do it, I'm sorry, but I'm not all that sorry. If it's self-inflicted, that's something that they did. But the thing is, even if you do everything right, there's always that due to circumstances beyond our control. You could be doing everything right. You know you're doing it right. You're following all the rules. You're meeting all your deadlines. And you're cocky. You're sailing. Everything's going great. You're driving that convertible. And what could possibly go wrong? Well, disasters happen. And we'll go through some of the disasters that you can encounter whether or not you did anything wrong. So just general advice going through it. I'm going to repeat this a few times. Keep your eyes open and watch your industry and your life. Have a plan B. You know the old don't put all your eggs in one basket? Be flexible, adaptable, nimble, light on your feet. Have multiple income streams. Don't put all of your writing career and all of your effort into your reverse harem Bigfoot erotica. That might be hot this year, but maybe not next year. Let me give you a few examples. And no, I don't write reverse harem Bigfoot erotica. I leave that to you, and yet. Okay, here's one of my big successes. Earlier on in my career, I wrote a high-tech thriller with my co-author Doug Beeson called Ignition. It was about terrorists at the Kennedy Space Center, that they sort of took over the Kennedy Space Center. This was during the time of the shuttle program. And they had planted explosives on the space shuttle, and they were holding it and the astronauts on board hostage for zillions of dollars, and big thriller. And of course, there's one lone astronaut who looked very much like Bruce Willis, trying to go into the space center and saving everything. That sold for a really good six-figure advance to Tor Books. We had movie studios fighting over it. We sold it outright to Universal Studios. And with that money, I bought the land that I built my house on. I started construction. I had all kinds of stuff going on. This was going to be made. In fact, they were talking to Bruce Willis about starring in it. They hired a screenwriter to do the script for it. And then the Space Shuttle Columbia blew up. And nobody's going to touch a space shuttle thriller where terrorists threaten to blow up the shuttle. So that, Universal owns that book. It is dead as a doornail. It will never be touched. It will never be made into a movie. Well, and it doesn't help that the space shuttle program is no longer in existence either. But you got your money. I got my money. I got my advance money. I would have made a lot more money if they filmed the movie. Another thing that I banked a whole lot of my career on was I got heavily into writing comics. I wrote monthly comic books. I had a whole series of Star Wars comics. I worked for DC. I worked for Marvel. I worked for Dark Horse. I worked for Topps. I worked for IDW. I did my own original stuff. I did Justice Society comics. I did X-Files. I did a whole bunch of those. I loved writing comic scripts in addition to the books I did. It was steady work. It was fun and fast to write. Comic books are 22 pages long. I could write a 22-page script in like 2 or 3 days. And they paid like $3,000. And with that, I could write a comic script. And for that month, I paid my mortgage and I paid my car payment. It was great work. I was guest of honor at San Diego Comic-Con 2 times, which means they pay for your hotel, which is huge at San Diego Comic-Con. So these 2 Star Wars comics here in the picture, they came out, and there are comic bestseller lists, just like there's the New York Times bestseller list. The one on both of them hit number 5 on the comic bestseller list. The one on the left was the first comic I published with Star Wars. Tales of the Jedi, number 1. It hit number 5 on the comic bestseller list, and that comic sold 500,000 copies of that one issue. The one on the right is the last Star Wars comic I published. It also hit number 5 in the bestseller list. It sold 49,000 copies. In the space of like 5 to 7 years, the comic market imploded. I was selling less than 1/10 as many copies as the other one, which meant that they cut their lines, they stopped running issues, they stopped giving me comics work. Star Wars was a huge breakthrough for me. I got asked in 1993 or something like that to write Star Wars books. I was the second author after Timothy Zahn to write Star Wars. It was huge. I loved working on them. I did Star Wars novels. My wife and I did a Star Wars young adult series. I did Star Wars comics. I did Star Wars pop-up books. I loved it. I edited anthologies. I did 54 projects for Lucasfilm. I had it made. I was their number 1 author. Nobody else got as many Star Wars projects as I did. I met George Lucas. I went up to Skywalker Ranch every month. This was great. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show The Blacklist. This has nothing to do with the TV show The Blacklist. There was a dispute between Lucasfilm and Star Wars authors because Lucasfilm decided they were going to stop paying royalties to the authors. And some of the authors didn't like that. They made a big stink. There was a lot of authors. I wasn't one of the big mouths. but Lucasfilm thought that the best thing to do would be to cut loose every single Star Wars author they had and hire new ones. Overnight, all my work for Star Wars went away. So like I said, disasters happen. Keep your eyes open, have a plan B, be flexible and adaptable, and have multiple income streams. Now, fortunately, right when the TV show The Blacklist came out, which is not what I'm talking about, I had already started working on the X-Files. Chris Carter from the X-Files said, "Kevin, I love your Star Wars books. Would you write X-Files for me?" So they offered me 3 X-Files books. And that's when I was connected with Brian Herbert, and we started writing Dune novels, and the Dune stuff was hugely successful. In fact, we sold our first 3 Dune novels to Bantam Books for the largest single science fiction contract in publishing history. I was working on my own stuff and doing things. So I had jumped to another life raft inadvertently right when the Star Wars stuff fell apart. I was doing tons of media tie-in projects. That was a big thing, that every movie that came out had a movie tie-in book to it. Somebody had the script and they wrote the novelization. There were paperback versions of every movie out in every drugstore, every 7-Eleven, everything. They did spin-off novels on like every TV show. There were Battlestar Galactica novels, and I'm sure you've all seen Star Trek novels all over the place, that was a thing. Anytime a movie came out, anytime a TV show, there was steady work for you to go and write media tie-in stuff. Yep. I loved it. I could pick up the phone and just go, hey, I knew all the editors who did these, and because I had proved myself that I was willing to work in somebody else's universe. It's their IP, so they own the copyright. I would get paid like $10,000 for 3 weeks worth of work to do a movie tie-in novel. Hey, John Ordover, I've got 3 weeks free. Can you send me movie novelization? Sure, here's Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow. Write that into a book. And I did. And I wrote my own books, but this was always a fallback. You could always get this work. And it all disappeared in like the space of a year or so. When's the last time you saw a movie tie-in paperback in the stores? They just don't do them anymore. That's nothing that I planned for, and it's nothing that I did to screw up my career. That work just went away. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Mainly it's because the mass market paperback market went away, and that's the only places these things lived. And because the movies would charge such a high licensing fee to do that, when the paperback market collapsed, the publishers couldn't make enough money to even pay the licensing fee, so they just stopped doing them. I wrote books based on computer games. I did StarCraft books and things like that. That these were good bread and butter moneymakers. But all of the media tie-in stuff just went away overnight. Let's get a little, I should have done this before. So here I could just pick up the phone and get good work. I had it made. The work was always there until it wasn't. Let's get into an even bigger scale here, that around 2010, the whole world of traditional publishing just kind of knocked off its axis. Borders, one of the 2 largest bookstore chains in the entire country, just went bankrupt. And Borders was a more genre fiction-centric bookstore than Barnes & Noble was. And so for those of us who wrote science fiction, fantasy, horror, romance, we lost way more bookshelf space than just half of the stores. So suddenly our outlets went away. Major publishing houses, there used to be like 13 or 14 major publishers that when I wrote a book, Kevin Anderson wrote a new book, and my agent could take it out and shop it among 13 different publishers. Well, they all did their Pac-Man imitation, and they ate each other up, and they came down to like 5. And some of those 5 kind of colluded to not compete with each other. So you had almost no place that you could even send your books. And like commensurately, because of that, author advances like dropped 90% across the board. The Dune books, the first 3 Dune books that I sold to Bantam Books with Brian Herbert, we got $3.5 million for that contract. We don't get that anymore for our contracts. Nobody does. It's always like 10% of what it used to be. Here's a tale of 2 fantasy trilogies, my own trilogies, 10 years apart. 2009, I published this fantasy adventure trilogy, the Terra Incognita trilogy, The Edge of the World, The Map of All Things, and The Key to Creation. That was sold to Warner Books. 10 years later, I sold another big epic fantasy trilogy, Spine of the Dragon, to Tor Books. I got paid 1/5 as much for the second trilogy, and I'm a bigger name now. And my agent was excited, saying that was one of his biggest deals he's made in years. The money has just dropped. Then let's go to the El Dorado for everybody. The fairy lights that everybody changes. There's Hollywood. You want to get your options. You want to sell your stuff to Hollywood. You want to make movies out of it. Don't ever believe what they say. And don't ever count on the money. For example, there's this little movie, Dune. $400 million box office, 6 Academy Awards, and the part 2, the second half of Dune, is coming out last weekend. Well, it's not. It's coming out in March. Brian Herbert and I started working actively on getting this movie made 27 years ago. And this is Dune, the best-selling science fiction novel of all time. And it still took 27 years for it to come to the screen. I was just talking with a writer-director friend of mine, and he gave me the kind of shocking statistic that the average movie, so if your book gets not just optioned, actually bought to be made into a movie, the average movie takes 8 to 12 years to get to the screen. Stephen Sears, who was here as a guest, you'll see him around doing some panels. Steve and I wrote a graphic novel called Stalag X, human POWs in a alien concentration camp. We sold an option on it. Francis Lawrence, the guy who did The Hunger Games and I Am Legend and Red Sparrow, loves the graphic novel. He wants to make the movie. He's hired a script writer, one of the Doctor Who script writers who's worked on a bunch of other TV series. She's been working on the script. It's in active development. Stephen and I have been pitching this for 21 years. And now with the WJ strike that happened, over 100 days, we got a notice from Francis Lawrence invoking a clause in the option contract saying, due to force majeure, which is the strike, they froze our option and stopped the clock ticking, because an option lasts for like 1.5 years. So suddenly our option stopped work, because they pay to renew it. Well, they stopped counting the time for 100 days, 5 months we lost. And now the clock, we got a notice, the clock has started ticking again, but it's still under active development. There's a Dune spin-off TV series that I'm the co-producer on. They had cast it. They have all the scripts written. We got the scripts dropped on us the day before the WGA strike. They optioned this in 2016. 2016, they actually paid us a big chunk of money. So here, we want this book, and here's the money for it. But the big money, the big payoff comes when they start filming the episodes. How do you film the episodes when the screen actors are on strike? They had the scripts all done, but they suddenly couldn't even read them because the writers went on strike. This has been 7 years since they bought the book. Every year, my wife Rebecca and I, this like a January thing. We sit down and we kind of map out, all right, what is the money that we're expecting to come in this year that we can budget? Like, because I've got book contracts, I know this is going to get paid. And I know royalties come in at this point. And we're going to run these 2 Kickstarters so we can kind of guess what that'll be. And we project how much royalties we're going to make from our indie books, and we map all this stuff out. And every year we list the multiple 6- and 7-figure checks that we're going to get from these Hollywood deals when they come through. And it never happens. It's sort of a pie in the sky. Yeah, right. When that happens, we could get that $1 million advance. I know a lot of people, I've talked to indie authors here, that is their holy grail. They want to sell an option to something that they spend a lot of time. But when you're working with Hollywood people, they love to talk and not do anything. You know how they say no in Hollywood? Boundless enthusiasm followed by endless silence. They talk to you about how great it is and how excited they are. I had the Stalag X, the thing with Stephen Sears that I was talking about. We had this other company that had made a bunch of movies, and they were really interested in Stalag X. And what they wanted was a shopping agreement, which is sort of a step below option. Shopping agreement means that they basically get to keep it and try to do something with it, but they don't have to pay you anything. But they were really excited. They were an established studio, and they really wanted Stalag X. And so they wanted to set up a weekly strategy meeting. So we had to talk to them on the phone for like 2 hours every week, every week, every week. 2 hours where they didn't say anything. They just talked for 2 hours. And I've got book deadlines. I've got other things that I don't really want to give up 2 hours every week. So I started losing my enthusiasm. And finally, we pressed them, and it turned out that they really didn't have anything going on, but the head of their development was just a big Kevin Anderson fan and got off on talking with me for 2 hours every week. So that ended fast. We didn't keep going on that one. So disasters happen. Again, I'm going to keep hammering this. Keep your eyes open. Have a plan B. Be flexible and adaptable, and have multiple income streams. But enough of my depressing stories. Let's get you depressed. One of the first really important pieces of advice that we tell everybody is don't quit your day job. I mean, Rebecca and I did quit our day job, but only after we had a year's worth of expenses in the bank. And she still kept her job after I quit mine. That the writing income is so volatile and so unpredictable. If you've got a decent day job, stick with it for as long as you can. Try to plan for unexpected disasters. And this is what I really want to emphasize. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with you and your writing. It doesn't have to be you chose the wrong genre to write in, or you screwed something up in your book. It can come out entirely from left field. And that picture that I put in there reminds me of one of our students at Superstars Writing Seminar. Very ambitious writer, had written a lot of things, and he had them on his laptop. Everything on his laptop. Didn't back up his laptop. His laptop got stolen from his car. Lost 4 years worth of writing. He learned his lesson. Yeah, and we were just like, man, my heart breaks for you, but there are backup things. And anyway, let's not get into that. Here's some examples that don't have anything to do with your writing. How many of you have a family? Okay. Sometimes you just can't say no. In almost all families, there's that one person who's sort of the walking screw up. That something always goes wrong, they don't plan right, somebody is gonna mess up something. It's your niece, her car breaks down, she never has any money extra, it's gonna cost $1,000 to get her car fixed, her parents can't afford to fix it, and if she doesn't get it fixed for $1,000, she's not going to be able to go to work, and she's going to lose her job, and she'll have no place to live, and then she's going to want to live in your spare room in your basement, so you better pay the $1,000. Because you're the one in the family that actually does make money, and you're the responsible one. There's your kid. There's your cousin. Somebody has to go into rehab, which is $75,000 for a week or so. They have to go in. Insurance doesn't cover it. You're the one that has to pay for it. It happens. Sometimes you can't say no when it's the family. There are employee problems. I've had a bunch of employees, and this is not referring to anybody that I have right now. I'm just saying this in public. Somebody's recording it. Marie is awesome. She's a great assistant. She is wonderful. But I didn't always have great assistants. In fact, I had one rather remarkable assistant who got us into all kinds of trouble. Got us into contracts and obligations that nearly bankrupted our company, did things that destroyed my reputation, that if I didn't have a sterling reputation from decades of working with people, I would be gone. I wouldn't have a career right now. There were some sexual improprieties with other employees. There were people at conventions that this person got into trouble with, and it all bled back on me. And I still have PTSD from that. I still have real trouble. And this is a person that I had put all my trust in to run the company, to do all the stuff that I didn't want to do so I could write, because I'm good at writing, and the more writing I do, the more money we make. But I handed off too much of it to somebody who turned out to be not reliable. And that really burned and messed us up. We had other people that, like, we do a lot of shipping. We do Kickstarters, so we have to ship up books, and kind of mixed up the addresses so that the Kickstarter backers that bought a trade paperback copy of the new book ended up getting a full hardcover set of the 7 books. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen, and cause some fixing, but anyway, so the help isn't always the help. There are medical problems. It hurts in more ways than one. I showed you Dean Wesley Smith's picture up there. Some of you know about Dean recently. He's a very prolific writer. He has not missed a blog post. He's very proud. In like 12 years, he posted a blog every day and never missed one. He's in good shape. He keeps himself healthy. He went out on a run in Las Vegas with a charity run or something. And was it? Okay. And he fell and shattered his shoulder. He had to have surgery. His shoulder has been replaced. How well do you think he's going to keep up on his daily blog when he has a shattered shoulder and is on medication? And we're seeing him tomorrow night, so I'll ask them. But ironically, his wife, Christine Catherine Rush, was the one that I wrote this slide for, because Chris and Dean are both very prolific writers. They write all kinds of books. At the time, they both were writing tons of media tie-in books. Chris wrote Star Trek books. Dean wrote Men in Black books and Star Trek books. They had all this stuff that they were doing together. And she's healthy too. She was out doing a bike ride. Her bicycle hit a pothole. She went over the handlebars and broke her elbow. Her elbow broken meant that she couldn't type. And she was in so much pain she couldn't concentrate on writing. And when she took the pain pills, she didn't have any pain, but she still couldn't concentrate on any writing. So she couldn't do any writing. She couldn't meet her deadlines, all because she hit a pothole on a bike ride that she was trying to keep herself healthy. Fortunately, she was married to Dean, and Dean is a workhorse, and he was able to pick up and basically finish her deadlines for her. So that was a miraculous save for her. How many of you know who W.P. Kinsella is? He wrote the novel that turned into the movie Field of Dreams. The book was called Shoeless Joe. Made into the movie Field of Dreams. Huge success. His publisher said, "This is great. We're buying the next book from you for a lot of money." And he accepted the contract. He was in a taxi cab in New York, I believe, and the cab was rear-ended. He hit his head, and there wasn't any real obvious injury, but he had a concussion and something just wasn't right. And he had migraines from that point on, and he couldn't concentrate, and he never did finish the book. That's why there was no other books by W.P. Kinsella, the guy that should have had it made. This is an actual tweet that I sent on New Year's Eve, 2019. Well, I'm sorry, I gotta tell you, my 2019 really sucked. 2020 was a different kind of suck. There are things that you can't plan for. I didn't expect a global pandemic, but here's the repercussions. And you all know what COVID did to everybody. But we were running Superstars writing seminars. We have like 300 people show up for that. We make money at Superstars. That's one of our income streams that we do. We had already booked the hotel, paid our deposits, taken money from everybody for their membership. And then COVID hit, so we had to cancel the seminar. We got penalized on a lot of the deposits that we put in. We didn't make any money that year on Superstars because we had to refund everybody their memberships. I couldn't make any money with that. I also was doing 1 or 2 Comic Cons and conventions every month. I had a pop-up bookstore. We would go to these conventions in the dealer's room, kind of like the rave thing that's going to happen here on Friday. Depending on what the show was, our best one ever is I came home in one weekend and made $25,000 in book sales in one weekend. The bank looked at me like a drug dealer because I was coming in with bricks of cash. Well, COVID hit. All conventions are canceled. Nobody goes to conventions. And so I had $60,000 worth of book inventory in my basement. And always have a plan B. We started an online bookstore because all conventions were canceled. If you were a fan of Kevin J. Anderson and wanted a signed book, well, you're not going to see him at any conventions. You might as well buy a signed book from Kevin's website. And we developed that, and it is now one of our biggest income streams, having our own online bookstores, selling my books. I was starting to really get building up to get paid to give talks, like this talk. Well, not this one, because it's too depressing. Nobody else wants to pay for this. But I was giving talks at like banking conferences on the future of money from science fiction. I wasn't a science fiction writer. I was a futurist. And so they would pay me to show up and give a talk for an hour. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. And I would get paid. Then you had to sit for dinner with like bankers and stuff. But it was fine. I was doing all this and I'm building up. I had a speaking agent. They were starting to book everything. And this was going to be a good income stream for me. And COVID. So all of that went away. And I haven't heard from my speaking agent since. But COVID also taught me that I kind of like staying home and sleeping in my own bed. But anyway, to get back to our indie stuff, we all know that there was like a huge gold rush in indie publishing. You guys explored unexplored territory, that there's huge resources out there, that there were all kinds of untapped genres that Michael Anderle calls them the whale readers, that they found readers that just want to read books as fast as they can. And those were customers that HarperCollins wasn't catering to, that back in, I'm going to do a productivity talk tomorrow, I think, but back when I was writing for Trad, you really weren't allowed to write more than 2 books a year. That was like stretching the book buying public way too much. Now you guys, indie authors, are every 4 weeks if you can do it. Some of you even faster. But indie publishing has had a boom decade, and there are entrepreneurs that come up with strategies, and they do things like nobody else has ever done before. And it is great. It's virgin territory. You can do all of this stuff, but in traditional publishing, and indie is different from traditional, duh, but there are patterns, and traditional has, over the years, there's been ups and there's been crashes. There's been ups and there's been crashes, and they had to reinvent how they do things. They reinvent how they do things much slower than you guys do. But don't think that some big disruption can't come in and mess things up. Amazon, if you might have noticed, has kind of a lot of power in the marketplace. Tomorrow they could say, you know what, we're just going to cut the share that you guys get by 20%. And we can. That would disrupt a lot of things, how you do it. I'm not expecting them to do that, but the whole point is you don't know what the asteroid is that's going to come down. So I'm going to go back to the important part, that never, ever assume that you have it made. You could be having a super successful year, but don't assume it's just going to be that way for the longest time. Think of how many music stars have had a one big hit song. Anybody remember MC Hammer? Lots of money, big hits, spend all the money, and then you don't have any more hits, and then what happens? Never assume you have it made. How many of you have seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail? I'm going to try to do the voices because I didn't feel it was copyright correct for me to embed the movie video, but sometimes I feel like the king of Swamp Castle. Other kings said I was daft to build a castle in a swamp, but I built it all the same, just to show them. It sank into the swamp. So I built a second one. That sank into the swamp. I built a third one. That burned down, fell over, then sank into the swamp. But the fourth one stayed up. So you can come out of the black ice if something goes wrong. Try something, then try something else, and keep trying. Have your plan B, or plan C, or whatever. If you're doing well this year, and I love it if you're having a great year, and you're bragging about having a great year, and this is wonderful, wonderful, great, set aside a nest egg. Put the money away, because next year might not be that great. And then when you have a huge nest egg, then go spend it and buy everything you want. So anyway, be adaptable, try something, and just a last thing to leave you with, David Tennant's my favorite doctor. So thank you all very much. I hope it wasn't too much of a downer.